Right.
Hello, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think we're in the fiscal sustainability group. Is that where you wanted to be?
Hi, Carrie. Yes, we did.
Hi, good. Hi, folks. Let me see if I can find the screen to share with you and get us started. Can you see this?
Yep.
All set? Okay. Before I just get into this fiscal sustainability and repeat those goals, just some context that we had gathered before this is a little bit of context in terms of where we've been and where we're headed from a fiscal standpoint. And as you know, we're at about a $30 million budget right about now, more or less. We've grown our taxes on a per family basis from under $12,000 on average to over $15,000 on average in the last 9 or 10 years. So that's a 25 or 30% increase. And given that on our $30 million town budget, 80% of it is really all about what we pay our employees. So 24 million of the 30 million is what we pay our employees, and a 2% or 3% increase on 24 million would be, some number like $400 or $500,000 in new spending every year that we're obligated to spend. And since we're only growing at 10 new houses a year, if each new house is one of those large houses that will glean $20,000 in taxes, that's $200,000 in new revenue. So the revenue is growing at nominally 200,000. The salaries are growing nominally at 400,000. And that explains to a great extent why our taxes continue to increase. So that's sort of where we are. And we're probably going to continue on that sort of trajectory. The notion of balancing revenue and costs to keep our taxes under control is sort of the definition, I think, of what sustainability is. So I don't know how you feel about all of this. I'll put the actual goals up. My grandmother used to say when I was complaining about taxes, she would say, are you bragging or complaining? I mean, I think we're a very wealthy town in terms of the average income of most families. And that's a fairly recent phenomenon, the last 25 or 30 years, because we weren't always like that. And, but that's where we are, and it continues to be where we're headed. So I'll shut up and unmute yourself. We have a small group. I think we can just carry on a conversation. Raise your hand if you want to speak, unmute yourself and fire away. Ask a question or make a comment.
So can you just say the number again for total budget?
Total budget is a little over 30 million.
30 million. Okay.
31 and change this year coming into next year.
What are some of the activities that the town has talked about for revenue generating that is not taxes and also not fundraisers?
Well, we do get money from the state, certainly. Not a lot of it. In our tax levy, sort of 98% of it comes from residential taxes. So
okay.
We do get money beyond our tax levy from the state, like for school supplies and for paving the roads and things like that. So nominally about 95% of all of our revenues come from residential taxes. And I just learned on our previous, just to share with you, I learned on our previous discussion that there's an obscure sort of law about a ratio of commercial and residential, that if you don't have enough commercial to make a big difference, you can't have a different commercial tax rate. So we tax Ferns like we tax you and me.
Right.
That apparently, according to mass law, is not likely to change anytime soon. So. but
Right.
we do, I think we do, just to be fair, we do have the Friends of the Council on Aging. We have the Friends of the Carlisle Library. We have the Conservation Foundation. We have the Education Foundation. We have three very generous communities of church communities in town. There is a lot of extra help coming to
Oh, yeah.
the town. Yeah.
I
In
was
terms
more,
of-
oh, go
But
ahead.
in terms of income, there are a number of places. So the land use side of things tends to operate partially on fees, right? And the code compliance, all of that kind of thing. The medical side of the fire department, that is all billed to insurance companies. So there are some things that are done that way. The thing that happens is it's always kind of very attractive to charge fees for what everybody else does, but not what you do. And the thing is that when you start heading down that road, all of a sudden, for some people it's the garbage, and for other people it's, start charging for the ride on the school bus and use of the library and whatever. There's a lot of fees you could charge for what our schools do, and you just once you start heading in that path, that's kind of where you end up.
Totally.
Right.
I was honestly more thinking like, what are some of the shared costs that like, if the town government and the fire department, like the emergency services and the school could share like servers or, is just coming to mind. Like, is there something that, Carlisle could do to bring costs down and then, revenue generate off of the side of that onto, like local businesses, right? Rent things like server space or, just
Right.
I'm more just spitballing here in terms of like, are there other ways to generate revenue that are like totally outside the box?
Right.
That
The
won't
things that kind of go
impact-
that way are things like internet service.
Yeah.
If we did things like that, and it's very complicated to try to do that when you don't have a municipal power like Concord does. But
Right.
that's the problem, is we're not of a size where many of those things become feasible. But would be awfully nice to have a different internet provider in town. There's whatever it's.
Yeah. I
There,
get
one of the things about consolidation that actually, from what Kerry says, I'd be interested to know where he gets his numbers from. In that, when you start to consolidate, then there's no responsibility. So if all the departments use one resource, then it's a free for them. And so when he says how much percent is for people, I'm not sure he's including. I think the numbers may be higher than he's saying. So there are a lot of people costs that don't fit into the departmental budgets, right? All of the retirement, all of the benefits and all that, those don't go in department budgets. Those go in a big block, and it doesn't cost the departments anything to do those. So for them, it's just it's cheaper to have a full-time employee than two part-times. Whereas for the town, that's not true. So you just have to be careful when you talk about consolidation, that what you end up with is nobody being responsible for the money that's being spent, and then losing control over it.
Emily, the discussions in terms of raising revenue have centered around a few themes. One is making the town more amenable to commercial. This is a problem
Yeah.
because of zoning. Our zoning is complicated, as if you attend a town meeting, you would have seen. Secondly, the fact that we do not have municipal water means it's very difficult to do a high density building, like an office building. And third, our transportation system, we have essentially no major access roads in and out of town. We've talked about raising the number of houses. John Valentine has run the equations on if we could get to, I think, another 150 to 200 households, the town would be more sustainable financially, but then that cuts into the land use and the open space side of the equation. More radical proposals I have heard over the years include consolidating the schools regionally, something that would probably put most of the parents of school-age children up in arms. But again, we have a consolidated high school. If we had a consolidated elementary and middle school, that might save some money. Then the other side of the equation is what happens if you get draconian on the budget and say tax rates cannot go up, tax burdens cannot go up. Then you are faced with the fact that you will be firing people. End of story. As Carrie said, with at least 80% of the budget going into people expense, if you want to hold the budget flat or the tax burden flat, you are going to end up firing people. So these avenues have been explored, and nothing that doesn't involve severe pain has come up. That may be a pessimistic summary, but I've been watching this for.
Well,
Right,
I think
sure.
it's a reasonable summary, and I think the piece of that is to understand the level of services that the town wants and demands. And if you want to hold the line, then you have to understand that some of that may change from what you have now.
Right, and I would point to an experience Brian, probably Carrie will remember, but it was before your time, is back in the mid 80s, the town turned down an override. And as a result, we ended up with no staffing for our town police overnight, and all overnight coverage for emergencies had to be provided by the state police. That's the kind of pain.
Right, and the librarian in the school, they got rid of the libraries at the school and a number of other things. I actually do remember that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, the thing for
But
them
one other
was,
thing we did was defeat an override on the high school and said we weren't going to contribute our 1/3 share. And the town of Concord said, well, then you're not coming to this school. So, as a minority partner in that regional partnership, we don't really have a strong voice to say, hey, we're not going to go along. And that was, I don't know, Carrie, how long ago that was. Seems like maybe 10 years ago. And they had to go back to the town meeting and we had to approve it.
right. But the thing about the 80s, which made it, people think about that stuff was possible, was the people in the town, many of them still remembered when they had an on-call police department, right? And when you had a domestic, the selectman would show up at your door and come and sit down with you and talk through what your problems were, right? It was a different town that they were coming out of.
Yeah.
Now I think people have a different level of expectations for what the town's gonna
Right.
provide.
But on that topic about our expectations of police services, I mean, I get a very strange sense when I read the police blotter each week in the Mosquito, and I see that the most common police activity every day, every week, is, I've forgotten the terminology now, a property check. I don't think anything bad was happening. I don't know what was going on, but the number one thing every single day, every single week is a property check. And then scattered in amongst that, week before last, somebody complained that their neighbor was yodeling. And a policeman actually investigated and discovered that the lady was calling her cat. Now, this is all very humorous, but it's costing us money to have this kind of weekly humor in the police blotter, and having police available to address what I think in some situations would be a waste of police time, and you could be prosecuted for it because you're keeping the police from doing other things. I mean, somebody in the police blotter last week complained that the neighbor's bees were trespassing on their property. And heaven forbid the bees should come and pollinate your plants. But if we want to be a rural town like we spoke of in another group, and is one of our values, then, you know, we're not going to have a leash law for honeybees. You know, police seem to be getting asked to do things that are absolutely, totally not police business. And I don't quite understand it. And I think these property checks, I don't know if they generate revenue or not, but there's a lot of them, they happen every day. It seems to me that could be a very reasonable service for a fee.
Well, it's interesting that because we are so small, we don't have many economies of scale. And I was really surprised, pleasantly so, to hear that Concord and Acton just 2 weeks ago voted to combine their two towns' needs for dispatch services. And I didn't think that would happen in my lifetime, but even towns that are much larger and can afford to be doing more are looking for ways to do more with less, if you will, in that respect. So, you know, we're never going to grow to a size of a Concord, I don't think, at 10 new houses a year and 100 new houses in 10 years. When we talk about 25 or 30 years, we might at that point be built out with another 250 houses. And with no other land available for any kind of future development at that point. That's a possibility based on the rate at which we've been growing for the last 20 years.
One of the things I think is important when you do start to look at the expenses, and I've seen people do this time and again, you know, that let's fix the town's finances. So let's, you know, find where we have savings in the DPW. You know, look at the town budget. That's not where the money is. And so at some point when you want to save money, you're gonna have to look at where the money is going. And there are, yeah, so I'll just say that. And what level of service you want there.
So I have a question. I'm pretty new to all this, and I'm wondering, how would I get informed and learn about the balance of the budget and where most of the money comes from, and more importantly, where it goes?
Did you go to town meeting?
Not this year, no.
Okay, so the in town hall, there's going to be a book that they handed out at town meeting, and they voted on the budget. And so the budget is there, and that's, again, it's not categorized exactly perfectly because some of the, you know, expenses are hidden in groups, but it gives you a reasonable idea. That, and there's also a town at the end of the year, there's a annual report that's written that I believe has everything in it. And all of that will be in town hall. I think that the annual report is probably online as well.
I too am also like new to this. I've lived in town for, you know, almost, I want to say a little over 11 years, but just kind of watched from afar for a long time. Can someone give me like a soundbite on, I know that we've talked about like fix the town's finances. How badly broken are they? And what's, you know, like what's the tipping point? Because they don't, you know, at a $30 million budget, I understand it's probably pretty lean for, you know, many town budgets, especially with schools such as ours. But, you know, what's the run rate, and, you know, how bad, quote unquote, could it possibly be, I guess, would be my question. Like what's sustainable and what isn't?
Well,
I think Kerry summarized it well when he said that you're probably looking at a shortfall of $200,000 to $300,000 a year minimum that
Okay.
would have to be plowed into new taxes to balance the budget. And that does not include some of the things that are on people's wish lists, including, by the way, mine, like a community center or a new public services building, or sorry, safety services building, et cetera. So
Okay.
the town is slowly drifting, not underwater, but to the point where the tax rates are a serious problem for a growing number of residents, particularly seniors. And we can certainly tread water for a while longer. No, that's, we can have the taxes drift up, but it's probably not sustainable. And one real emergency, it's sort of like where those people were living paycheck to paycheck, and wait, an emergency happens, a pandemic, something, or town hall burns down and it's not adequately insured or something like that.
Okay.
And
That's what I was getting at. Like
Yeah.
how much can we tread water? Because I heard what
No.
Carrie said, but it's like, okay, what's how many years kind of thing?
That side of thing, the town is in very good shape. The town has reserves. It's to where they want for reserves, all of that kind of thing. I think the question is, how much can the people afford to pay the taxes? And that's really where the issue is. Financially, the town's in fine shape. The kinds of things that can happen is, you go to a full-time fire department, that would make a big difference. You have some changes in how the schools operate and requirements that come down that aren't unfunded mandates. Those can kind of hit us hard. But otherwise, financially, you're fine as long as you consider, the increase that we'll just call that inflation, and our incomes are going to go up as fast as our taxes are. So away we go. And that works for some people, and other people are going to have to move out of town. And depends on how.
To Emily's question, in your time that you've been here, there've been two, and I'm just thinking of Bob's comment, there've been two substantive increases in the taxes related to the new building at the Carlisle School for Spalding or the high school. And both of those, went before the town, and, those were presented as this will be the incremental cost of those. But, to Bob's point, a community center or a new safety service building or other things could potentially have an impact that would change the budget.
Well, one thing, Emily, that there is some good news. For example, the debt for the high school, we're paying about $900,000 a year for the high school just to recover the debt. And by the end of, by 2030, we'll have spent downward of 700,000, and then it goes away. So 2030, we have $700,000 that we don't any longer have to pay. So, there are those kinds of step functions too that help us along the way. And they'll probably be filled with, well, let's do something with that money because we can incur more debt and satisfy more of the needs of the citizenry. So, but I think one of the things that we're going to probably be asked to make decisions about are given, for example, the seniors.
Those groups are ready to launch. And then again, at the end of the meeting, we'll make sure to share in the chat again the link to the committee page where when the survey is launched later in June, we'll make sure to get that out to you. And we'll also make sure, of course, that the information gets sent about it. So I believe there's a place on the website as well to make sure that you're signed up for the email list relating to this process. So if you don't think you are, if you didn't receive any email notifications about this, for example, maybe visit the site, make sure we have your email address so we can make sure to get the survey and any other opportunities out to you. But so it looks like the join breakout group option is launched. So take your pick for this last round. Thank you so much to the facilitators. I really appreciate it. Try to remember to hit record one more time. And when you see the group.
Hey, people.
You can hear me now, right? Can you hear me? Okay, and let me see if I can get something on the screen that makes sense to everybody. All right, I think you should be looking at fiscal sustainability. Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, welcome. This is, the group is small enough, I think, that we don't need to mute people. And if you want to make a comment, ask a question, raise an issue, just raise your hand, unmute yourself and fire away. Just as a way of introducing the topic, and thank you for joining it, is that just a little bit of history over the last 10 years or so fiscally. We've grown from a nominally a $20 million budget to a $30 million budget. Our taxes have increased from a $12,000 average tax to a $15,000 average tax. And given that 80% of our $30 million budget is spent on personnel costs, and those have baked in contractual obligations that will make them grow at 2 or 3% per year, you know, we're looking at increasing our spending by a minimum of, anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000 a year, including benefits. But we're only growing at nominally 10 new houses per year. And so if you take an average house and say it's one of these new big houses that is taxed at $20,000 in taxes a year, 10 new houses is $200,000 in new revenue against maybe $400,000 or $500,000 in new spending for what's baked into our obligations to our employees. So we are going to continue to probably have increased pressure on the town budget and on taxes as we move forward. There are some bright spots. Our debt for the high school is being paid down, and by 2029 will be paid off. So there'll be $800,000 a year less in 2030 that we have to pay and have been paying since between now and then. So there are some, there are some bright spots, but there's no question that there's going to be a continued pressure on budget and on taxes. My grandmother used to say, when I talked about taxes, she said, "Carrie, are you bragging or complaining?" When I talked about my taxes. And I think, we've become a much wealthier town in the last 25 years than we had been in prior years. And I think there are a lot more people that are sort of not quite impervious to higher taxes, but aren't nicked quite as much as our seniors are, that maybe don't have the elasticity in their earnings to keep pace with the new taxes. So I don't think there's any question that this is going to continue to be a big issue for everybody. And I welcome your comments about how you think we're doing and what you think we're doing right and wrong. You need to unmute yourself and feel free to do that.
Thanks for the succinct summary of the overall financial picture. That's very, very helpful. I don't have any good solutions, but I just wanted to say thanks.
Well, in this, we look at the values of the town, which says we want to remain a rural town, but we want to have all the amenities of Brookline, and those two things are not very well compatible. And these are the kind of issues we're going to be facing. I think we have to find a way for revenue diversification, and that's going to take some ingenuity. It's going to take some new thinking, and it's going to take some conflict. But
Alan,
it's,
what do you mean by diversification? What do you mean by revenue diversification?
I mean, right now we are, 90% residential. And we're not going to build our way out of this. We're going to have to look at other revenue sources. That primarily means commercial. And that has a challenge in this town. If we continue, I mean, the whole idea that where we want to build this is in the center of town. I think that's crazy. I think you want to build things like that on the periphery of town where you can interconnect with municipal services from other towns where they already exist, like wastewater and municipal water and waste treatment. But I think those things are going to be very difficult to achieve in this town. But I think that's the kind of thing we need to be looking at.
This is Lana. I wonder too, I don't know how much relief it would bring, but I think sometimes there is such a focus on the immediate costs. We don't look down the road we don't look at projects from the standpoint of cost savings down the road. And one example, again, I have no idea if it would have been a significant impact or not, but the solar canopy at the school site, if that had been purchased rather than done through a lease agreement, the town would have benefited substantially more financially from the revenues that accrued to that, as I understand it. I may be wrong in my facts, but and I can't give you exact numbers, but generally owning a system like that does create more revenue for the owner. So it just feels that often the focus is on the immediate cost as opposed to potential longer term gains over time. And I think that's just something to consider in terms of how we can apply that to decisions moving down the road.
That's a good point. I think one of the things that swayed it in that direction, Lana, was that the town doesn't get any tax breaks. And if you're a private owner, if you put the solar panels on your house and paid for them yourself, you could get a tax break. The town couldn't do the same thing. So I think that's one of the reasons that made it more of a moot point. Alan, you could correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that clearly was carefully investigated as to whether that was a beneficial thing to do, is to buy it instead of leasing it. And at least the data that we got looks like overwhelming that it was a better deal for us to lease at this time rather than buy, because we were not eligible for the kind of incentives that a private purchaser would get.
But there are opportunities. I mean, the notion, the idea is a sound one, that we can be looking at spending where it will accrue more benefits, either in lower costs or more revenues going forward. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that 2 weeks ago, Acton and Concord decided to combine and regionalize their dispatch facility. Now, they're two much bigger towns than we are and they have much more economies of scale, and yet they were still looking for ways to further get economies of scale by regionalizing their dispatch functions. So we, as a small town, don't have the advantage of economies of scale, but we ought to be looking for ways to do so.
I can jump in on that. I agree. I think, it's one of those no stone unturned types of situations, and that includes, what we could regionalize without losing our character, our independence, and dispatch might exactly qualify in that. But also in town hall, this, again, the governance group is going to meet, but there's efficiency potential, where we currently have our departmental silos and they don't report up to, one captain, so to speak. We've got to look at everything. And, the third rail is, we look, you mentioned how much growth we would potentially get annually from building the same kind of houses on the same kind of lots. And, what that does to the school population and those costs, although we have seen steady declines in the school population. But all I'm really trying to get at is we need to do modeling like crazy and to really, and not just to, do one model to say, this is what's going to happen. These are ranges of options, and this is what this process ought to be yielding.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities for regionalization. If the dispatch thing had happened a year ago, it would have been something we could have done. Having spent just $3 million, what Concord and Acton doing are bringing their systems up to where ours is, and doing it more cheaply. But I think there are other opportunities for regionalization. Whether the town will buy them or not is the question. Clearly, one of the major opportunities for regionalization is the school. You want to do something more volatile than the Deer Committee? Let's talk about regionalizing the schools. But clearly that's 60 some odd % of our budget. And if you want to look at real cost savings, those are the opportunities that would have the most impact. Certainly, whether or not the town would buy something like that is real questionable.
Well, when you
Right. I mean, well, thinking about, at the very beginning of of tonight, when she was showing us the graphics of, where people voted on, why they moved to Carlisle, and the first one was open space, right, and beauty and nature, and the second one was schools. So I think it will be interesting to see where all the priorities lie. Where, I'm in this group because I don't have an answer, but I'm very concerned about how we are going to continue to go forward. And I would just like to pipe up and just say again, like, I agree with regionalizing whatever, synergistic efforts between Concord. I mean, I read the Concord Journal every week, and I'm always like, gosh, I wish we could partner with them on this. I wish we could partner with them on, X, Y, and Z, and offer, a lot more to the citizens of Carlisle, but still retain our unique identity. But yeah, I do feel like, I'm just very concerned.
And there are opportunities, Venice. I mean, I think there's a regional Board of Health consortium,
Right.
that deals with the land use side of the Board of Health, which is just a tremendous amount of effort involved over there, and requires tremendous specialization, versus the public health side. And what they've done is they've regionalized the land use side and left the public health side in the town itself. So those kinds of opportunities are there and very easy to do and implement in short term with savings.
Well, we hope the master plan will sort of highlight and help educate around some of these issues. I mean, we look at Acton and Boxborough, they regionalized down to the K through 8 level. And Acton Boxborough High School is ranked 2nd in the state. And, Concord Carlisle is 6th in the state. Now, that ain't all that bad, but they're not doing all that poorly by having gone through that regionalization down to the kindergarten 4 years ago. And they claim they saved a lot of money. It would be very difficult sell, I think, because the schools are such a draw for our town and so valued that it would be a really difficult thing. But we might face that as a rock or a hard place kind of choice.
I'll push that envelope a little further and say, if we went down that road, which you're right, it's a road that somebody could go down, then we basically have regionalized the town, and we should become North Concord, and with the village of Carlisle, like that. I feel like that's a pretty big third rail. But I have to say, like, it has definitely crossed my mind of, what are we doing? What in the world? How does this town sustain itself for going forward? And I just don't, like, we the economies of scale are just not here. They're non-existent. Like, I just feel like we are, it's kind of a losing battle. But I guess that's why we're all here together, because we care and we want to find ways
I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Carlisle yet. Even
No.
if school districts, how many people are moving out when their kids get to high school age because CCHS sucks? They're not. So
No.
it's about the rest of the character. It's about the other opportunities and experiences and things like that. We should be able to build, stay on a firm footing. So that's my opinion. I moved here because of the open space and quiet, because I never had children. And I say this, and I'll keep repeating it till I can no longer speak. Always happy to support the highest quality schools. And that doesn't matter which town we're part of or not, right? It's still going to be the best expense, and it's we can nibble around the edges all we want, but that's where there's the most bang for a buck, if you will. But study it carefully.
Linda, we haven't heard from you at all.
Well, I'm here and I'm listening. I don't have children. When we moved here 52 years ago, we didn't have children. And I happily supported through taxes a good school. But I don't see the problem so much with doing some regionalization in the school. I just don't see it. I don't think it's a problem. But that's maybe because I never had kids in the school.
Yeah. I'm going to chime in here as a parent who have had children in Carlisle School and then went to the high school. The Carlisle kids are different than Concord kids. And when they go to high school, Carlisle kids tend to stick to Carlisle kids because they are just a different breed. And that different breed comes from the care and attention that the teachers in Carlisle school system gives to the kids. This is not replicated in the Concord K-8 schools. So I strongly disagree as a parent of 3 kids that went through the system that regionalizing is going to be, may give us a buck or two here from a money standpoint, but you're taking away the only one really good charming thing you have for parents that they move in, and the school system is the strongest selling point you have here. We all have good air, we all have good water. This environment here is all similar, but the school system is an amazing attraction. And for the ones that they have gone through it and they have kids and they have gone through it, it is not the same. So this is really a point that I want to emphasize. If you have not had kids go through the school and then go to the higher school, ask your kids or ask the people who have kids, they will tell you that it is a very, very different experience going K-8 or to the 8th grade in Carlisle or going to the Concord.
Maybe we don't lose all of that. Where there's duplication is at the top of the organization chart a lot,
The duplication is not duplicating, because if it was duplicating, we will have the same experience. It's the people make a difference, and the people start from the top and goes to the teacher level and anything in between. So the reason it's successful is a team of people. If you duplicate the tops, you're going to lose, or in any grade, you try to sort of make it regionalized and take one person out. Yes, you lose this in the salary and so forth, but then you lost autonomy and you lost a lot of things that makes those decision-making, keeping it at Carlisle and makes it special. You would lose that to a bigger system because they have a lot more schools and much more people to deal with. So it's not the same. It's not duplicating. It's actually the reason you have a better system is because people here make decisions for smaller groups, and they're really then they look at the interest of a smaller community, but it pays off in the long run when you look at the kids. If you're able to compartmentalize the kids from Carlisle going to the high school or from Concord to the high school, they're just not the same. They don't have the same experiences from K-8.
I think that's probably true. There are 2 things that you can measure. One is quantitative. You can measure the dollars that would be involved in doing something like that. The other is qualitative, and I don't know that we've ever looked at any qualitative measurements of how our kids do versus the kids from Concord do. I know that our kids tend to be treated differently by the Concord kids. I can attest to that. In terms of the performance, you know, the second highest school in the state is Acton Boxborough, and the first highest is Dover and Sherburne, and we're pretty far down the list under those measurements. But we're still in the top 10, so you can't go wrong either way, I'm sure.
And I also want to encourage people to look at a little differently. Look at the number of kids from Carlisle and Concord that go to high school involved in other things, including drug use and so forth. So the impact is just beyond just academics. There's a lot more that goes on that protects our kids compared to others. So I would evaluate it not only in the dollar value, but also metrics of academics. That's great. But there's a third element here that does differentiate the kids from Carlisle, from Concord. It is just a reality. Ask your kids. They will tell you that.
I think
Did everybody see the warning?
Yeah, I think we're running out of time here. Any last comments? I'd appreciate hearing from you.
I just, we've just spent some time talking about how to reduce, our costs, right? Which is good. Always good to talk about that. But we haven't spent much time talking about how we can, increase our revenue other than from property tax. Like, I would love to, and I don't think we'll be able to do that in the next minute, but I'm really interested in that conversation. I really don't have any answers, but there has to be a way that we can increase revenue without damaging what we hold dear, the character of Carlisle from another group, right?
Right.
I don't know what that is, but we need to cut costs and we need to grow revenue. I don't know.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to get back into the overall group and for wrap up, I think. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you.
I didn't quite finish my thought there.
Oh, Jan, I'm sorry.
It's okay. This time I was trying to line it up exactly. I didn't quite finish.
So I think we are pretty much all coming back here, right? Yes, awesome. So thank you everybody for hanging on and participating in these discussions. I'm going to go ahead and screen share really briefly just for some closing remarks. And I am also going to, again, put the link for the master plan page in the chat. And that has some just really great resources on it that I would encourage you to review. In fact, that's actually the first thing I'm going to pull up, just so in case people need to hop off. It's such a great resource. Just another example of how dedicated your town is to this process. It's not something we see all the time, and it's so great. So if you scroll through and if you're interested in joining on Sunday, when we say rebroadcast, essentially the first part of the presentation, we're just going to play a recording, a rebroadcast, and then the breakout groups will go live. Depending on attendance, if it's a small group, we may just conduct it all in one discussion, kind of looking to see how many people show up. But if you feel you didn't get to discuss something and you want to, there, that link is there. The document that lists all of the draft vision, values, and goals is up there as well. And when the survey, we want to give the community some time to think about this, reflect, ask committee members questions, you know who the members of the committee are. And then when that survey goes live, we will share it with you and make sure you are aware of it. The other thing that I think is so very important, if you haven't done so yet, is to, I know there's a place on here because I saw it before, to sign up for, if you haven't signed up for an email to do so. And of course I can't find that now, but I know I saw it. So you're able to do that as well. And Mary Lynn, if I'm going crazy and wrong about that, certainly please. Oh, yep, right here. So under Map and Carlisle's Future, there's a stay informed by joining our mailing list. So if you're not on that, I absolutely recommend that you do, so that you can be the first to know when the survey is live, and any other community engagement that we do over the course of the summer, which would be kind of on smaller scales, similar, to kitchen conversations or something like that, to give people time to kind of digest and think about moving into the next step, which is recommendations. So that's the first thing I wanted to share because I know people have to hop off. We aren't going to do a takeaway summary from each group because I know with 5 groups at 3 times, I mean, that would just be a lot. But what we will do, we will process the notes and recordings and figure out how best to manage that and get you all of the information needed. I'm just going to
Tell your friends and tell your friends about Sunday. We want to see you. The breakout groups were very good sessions.
oh my gosh, they were so good. It was so great. I was so glad to hear the conversations I heard and really good points that people were making about, I think, starting to think about trade-offs and things like that. So again, just next steps, rebroadcast of this on Sunday. And then with the anticipated survey launch, we're working with our friends producing the survey. Our anticipated launch is around June 21st, but we'll make sure that once that's in place. And we're also working on kind of a virtual comment box as well, to kind of weigh in more about these as you have more time to reflect on them after tonight. But I strongly encourage you to visit that site and download the draft vision, values, and goals so you can kind of think about them and process them. But that is all that that we have tonight. And Jack, if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say a thank you to everyone that's still on. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our committee members for hosting the breakout groups. The ones that I attended were very helpful, as John indicated. I also want to say thanks, Alexis, to you and to David for doing a great job of running things behind the scenes. David Jang is our intern this summer, and we're really grateful to have him. And thank you for doing great work behind the scenes.
Really,
so,
very much.
Appreciate it, and was great. And I look forward to hopefully in the fall we can get out in person with our next community forum when we do one.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.
Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.